Let's begin the second session now. Let's have a look at what we'll be covering in this session. First, we'll begin with another meditation. We'll continue on investigating the body, particularly in this one, emphasizing the dependent nature of the body, not just emptiness. And then we'll follow that with a short review of some of the earlier points. Then we'll go back to the text and we'll look at one approach to investigating the person that seems to be here, using this reasoning of same or different. And then we'll be doing a meditation based on that, and looking for me, the person. And then after the meditation, we'll look at some common experiences that we can have from this emptiness meditation. And then in the text, start to move into post-meditation, what to do outside of the meditation on emptiness, and then finish again with question answer. And let's begin with the meditation. And we'll, again, as we did in the earlier session, we'll investigate the body. How does it appear to exist? How do we apprehend the body to exist? But then how does it actually exist? Let's do that practice now. Finding a nice, comfortable posture. Well, let's begin. Establishing a good posture to begin with. Back straight. And allow the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. Softening and relaxing all the muscles in the face. All the muscles around the eyes, soft and relaxed. Allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. And allowing the mind to come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. Releasing any thoughts that may arise. And just rest. Allowing the mind to remain relaxed, still, and clear. How does your body appear to exist? When you say my body, does the body appear to be a single thing, to exist independently? Does it seem to exist from its own side, to exist objectively? And then do we simply accept that appearance? Simply apprehending our body to exist there objectively. If the body exists there objectively, independent of everything else, then it must be findable. But where is there a body to be found there? If we look at where the body is located, what do we see? We see parts of a body. We see a chest, a head, arms and legs. Each one of these parts is not a body. But is the collection of these parts, is that a body? The collection of these parts is a collection of things, none of which is a body. So where is there a body to be found objectively within a collection of things, none of which is a body? Yet, other than these parts, what body is there? But even though we don't seem to be able to find the body objectively in the parts, that doesn't mean that there's no body at all. The body does exist. The body exists depending on other factors. The body exists depending on causes and conditions, such as all the food we eat and all the bodily processes that are going on. Other than merely this continuous unfolding of causes and conditions, what body is there? And the body exists depending on the parts, such as the head, chest, arms, and legs. Other than merely these parts, what body is there? And the body exists as simply being merely labeled depending on these parts. Other than being merely labeled, what body is there? The body is empty like an illusion, a mere appearance, a mere name, merely imputed by conception, merely labeled on its parts. And we can bring the meditation to a close. Let's begin with the review. And we saw yesterday that in the text it said, due to grasping to I and mine, all sentient beings cycle in samsara. So grasping to I means grasping to an inherently existent person, and grasping to mine means grasping to inherently existent phenomena. And we saw there that how this is the root of samsara is that whenever we see anything, everything we experience seems to exist completely independent of us. So this is what's called mistaken dualistic appearance. There seems to be a subject-object duality. And we have this habit of grasping. And so we have the habit of believing these appearances. So we just never question appearances. We just grasp. Yes, there's an independent me, independent objective world. So that's step 2, grasping to I and mine. And then every time we experience something, we have this mental factor of feeling, experiencing things as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And again, using the flower example, if we see the flower, it looks like it exists independent of us. We don't question that. We grasp, yes, there's a flower existing there objectively. But let's say we experience it that way. We have a pleasant experience when we see it. That pleasant experience, together with the belief that that flower is there independent, will naturally lead me to assume there must be some attractive quality there that's causing my pleasant feeling. So we'll see it as inherently attractive or attractive from its own side. And this view of emptiness is saying this is a misconception. And similarly, if we have an unpleasant experience, we'll naturally assume there must be some unattractive quality there. We'll see it as inherently unattractive. Or a neutral experience, inherently neutral. Once we have that misconception, then step 4 easily follows. Because if we're having a pleasant experience, I like pleasant experiences, I want pleasant experiences, that object, that flower there seems to be causing my pleasant experience, I want that attachment. Or if I'm having an unpleasant experience, I don't like them, I don't want them, that object there seems to be causing my unpleasant experience, get it out of here, aversion. Or if we're having a neutral experience, that just reinforces the mistaken belief that everything existing independent of us, which is in ignorance. Here, another word for that is confusion. These are the three main mental afflictions. All other mental afflictions come out of one of them or a combination of them. They're driving our behavior. And the Buddha's assertion is every action we do based on a mental affliction has a result. And the results of our actions are all of our experiences. And our experiences collectively, the Buddha used the word dukkha to describe that, often translated as suffering. So this is how this grasping to I and mine is the root of samsara, cycling life after life in the state of suffering or dukkha due to this grasping mind. But you may ask, if things, why do we receive this mistaken dualistic appearance in the first place? If that's not really how things exist, why do they appear to exist independent of us in the first place? And the answer is we go to ignorance, this grasping to I and mine. Every time we have that grasping to I and mine, that reinforces the habit, the seed of ignorance. But also that grasping to I and mine has another side effect called the latency or stain of ignorance. So that ignorance, that grasping, stains our mind, called the stain or latency of ignorance. What does that stain do? It means that whenever we perceive an object, that object seems to exist completely independent of us. So those stains are a little bit like a filter. We're looking out on the world through the filter of the stains of ignorance. That's why everything appears to exist completely independent of us. And then we saw that in the beginning of the text, that the main path of the victors, the victor was in Sanskrit jina, and a victor, a jina, is a Buddha, is someone who's overcome the two obscurations. And so we see here the two obscurations. What are the afflictive obscurations? Is this self-grasping mind. And to eliminate that, we can achieve nirvana. But then the cognitive obscurations, these stains of ignorance, are much more difficult to get rid of. And so these stains and the mistaken dualistic appearance that they produce are what's called the cognitive obscurations. We need to get rid of those to go on to achieve enlightenment. We do that, again, through the wisdom of emptiness, but empowered by the aspiration of bodhicitta. And then eventually we can eliminate those subtle stains of ignorance, eliminate those cognitive obscurations, and achieve full enlightenment. And so this is what Nagarjuna says here, that elaborations, which is another name for ignorance or grasping, will cease through cultivating emptiness. So to overcome all of this, we need this wisdom of emptiness. We need to come to realize emptiness. And then how to do this? We start with investigating me, the person, the me who's meditating here. How does this me appear to the mind? How do we apprehend this me that seems to be here? And then how does the person actually exist? And so we saw there that, like everything, the me that seems to be here appears to exist completely independently, and like everything else. And we never question that. We just accept and we just apprehend, yes, there's an independent me here. So we're grasping, self-grasping. But then how does the person actually exist? If we investigate, it says that we investigate the way in which things actually exist is that all phenomena, including the person, are a mere name, merely imputed by conception, merely labeled like snake onto a striped robe. So there is no me to be found there objectively, because the me is something merely labeled, meaning that what's actually going on here is that we are drawing a line, we are creating the me part. Remember, there's single experience, and within single experience, there's these two aspects, experiencer and experienced, and we create the experiencer and the experienced within experience, and then we give it a name, me, subject, experiencer, whatever label we want to give. But therefore, there's no me to be found objectively, like anything else, that the me only exists within the conceptual framework. Hence, it's a mere name, merely imputed by conception and not findable in the basis. Just like this example of the star. Star exists, but the only star that exists is the one we've created in our conceptual mind by drawing a line around all of that data, creating a single object and giving it the name star. There's no star to be found objectively there in the basis. Therefore, it's not findable in the basis, but star exists, me exists, everything exists, but not objectively. And then how can we do this investigation? There are many ways to come to realize that we're merely labeled, that we don't exist independently as we seem to exist. And the one we got here, we're following here in the text, is based on this quote from Nagarjuna, where he says, the person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness, nor is the person all of these together. Yet apart from them, what person is there? And so this is what's called the reasoning of same or different, meaning that if there is a me here to be found objectively, it must be findable. And it must be either the same as the body and the mind or different than the body and the mind. And so here, the first two, the person is not earth, not water, not fire, not wind, not space, not consciousness. Those first five of the six, what are called the six elements, is the body. So it's another way of dividing up the body into the elements of earth, water, fire, wind, and space. That's the body. And consciousness is the mind. So simplifying it, Nagarjuna is saying the person is not the body, the person is not the mind, nor is the person the body and the mind together. Yet, apart from the body and the mind, what person is there? Meaning the person is also not different. The person is not the same as the body and the mind. The person is not different than the body and the mind. Therefore, there's no person to be found objectively, because if the person exists objectively, it must be findable. It must be either the same as the body and mind or different than the body and the mind. And so then we find the way it's set up is it's presented this way of searching for me, the person, is often called the 4 essential points. And this is very well described in a book from His Holiness Dalai Lama called How to See Yourself as You Really Are. And he says there are 4 major steps toward realizing that you do not exist in the way you think you do. And so here, the 4 essential points are, first, identifying the object of negation. In His Holiness's book, he says identifying the target. So we saw earlier in this text that if we're going to search for this independent me that seems to be here, first we need to have a clear picture of the independent me that really seems to be here. Otherwise, what are we searching for? Again, if we're searching for a person in a crowded room, we better have a clear picture of what that person looks like if we're going to see if that person's in the room or not. So similarly here, we need to identify the me that really seems to be here, the me that we're identifying with, the me that is the basis of all of our behavior. That me we need to look for, because if it is objectively existent, we must be able to find it. And the second point in the 4 essential points is what's called in the text, establishing the pervasion. In His Holiness's book, he calls this limiting the possibilities, meaning the second step is, if there really is this independent me that seems to be here, it must be findable. And it can only exist in one of 2 places. It has to be the same as the body and the mind or different than the body and the mind. And if we can't find it in either of those 2 places, it does not exist. So that's the second step, knowing where to look, to be conclusive in our search. Make sure we look everywhere, same or different. Can't find, doesn't exist. So then we search. So step 3 and 4 is search. We can do this in either order, but the order we did, and the one that's most commonly described, is first, same. Is the me the same as the body and the mind? Meaning it must be findable here in the body and the mind. So we can search the body, where's the me? Search the mind, where's the me? And then also is, as Nagarjuna said, is the me just the collection of the body and the mind, to be complete there. But then if we can't find it there anywhere, then we must be able to take away the body and the mind and be left with the me. So if we take away the body and the mind, is there anything left over? No, there's just body and mind. So therefore, the me is not something different than the body and the mind. And so that's what we did in the last meditation. And we'll do this in a very clear step-by-step way in the meditation coming up now, using these 4 essential points. And so here then the text goes on to say, thus, within that state of meditative equipoise, when you investigate using a subtle awareness, so we've investigated, is the me the same as body and mind? Can't find. Is it different? Can't find. Then it's not to be found. So then it says, when we investigate, it says, and when a complete vacuity arises, such that for you yourself, there is no appearance of even a mere trace of the being, the person, or I who is in meditative equipoise, meaning you can't find anywhere the me, which is just a mere vacuity. I didn't find, it's not findable. Then it says, when that generic image of that pure emptiness becomes clear. So when that becomes clear, that not finding, then equipoise single-pointedly without any further elaboration or mental activity. Meaning that if we get to the point of not finding, and that not finding is quite clear that it's not there, stop, don't investigate more, and just rest in that experience of not finding, because that's an experience of emptiness. And hold that experience as long as you can. But the text goes on to say, if your manner of apprehending that non-affirming negative, that pure emptiness, becomes a little feeble, then from within a state of meditative equipoise, meditate single-pointedly investigating as before. Which means that if we come to this point of not finding, then hold that experience of not finding, which is a mere absence of findable person. That's emptiness. But often what will happen is if we hold that experience, very quickly it'll fade away or get distracted by something else. If that happens, go back, do the search again as before. And if you don't find, hold it again. This is what's being mentioned here. So it says, this is the way to sustain space-like meditative equipoise, because that experience of emptiness is like space, because emptiness is this absence of an independent me, a not finding, whereas space is described as an absence of contact. So that's also a mere absence. So emptiness is like space in that it's a mere absence of a findable me. There's no me there to be seen. And so that's what we're going to do now in meditation. We're going to go through these 4 steps in meditation and see how we go. Now, with the first one, identifying the object of negation, getting a clear picture of how this me that seems to be here is existing, how does it appear, then what's often recommended as a beginner to artificially create a strong sense of me. Because as a beginner, if we sit down, we relax the body, we quiet the mind, then a strong sense of me may sort of dissipate. Then it's a bit hard to get a clear picture of me when there's no strong sense of me anymore, because we're resting quietly in the body and the mind. So then because we're not familiar yet with this me that seems to be here, then we can artificially create a strong sense of me. And so what we're going to do in this meditation at the beginning is imagine a situation where someone is praising you for a job well done, that you did well. So generally, if someone's praising us for something we did, we have a very strong sense of me. Ah, yes, I did that. Me, I did such a wonderful job. And so when we have that appearance of me, then just rest in that experience of that me, because that's the me that we're identifying with and is the basis of all of our behavior. So we just rest in that experience of that me that really seems to exist there objectively, the one that's being praised. And then if we really exist in that way objectively, we must be able to find it. It can only be in one of 2 places, either the same as the body and mind or different than the body and mind. And so we'll look in those 2 places. And if you can't find it anywhere at the end of that search, then just rest in that experience of not finding. But let's see how we go. And then some comments after the meditation. Find a nice comfortable posture. let's begin. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. A vigilant posture is to keep the back nice and straight. And at the same time, allow the entire body to become completely relaxed. Allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. And then we can begin our investigation into me, the person. How do I exist? And we can begin by imagining a situation where you are being praised for a job well done, something wonderful you did. So imagine such a situation. And just rest in that experience of the me who's being praised. Now, can this me who's being praised be found anywhere? Can the me who's being praised be found anywhere within the body? So search thoroughly every part of the body and look for the me who's being praised. Can the me who's being praised be found anywhere within the mind? Again, search thoroughly every part of the mind and look for the me who's being praised. Is the combination of the body and the mind, is that the me who's being praised? Look closely. Or is the combination of the body and the mind simply two things which me, the person who's being praised, possesses? Yet, other than the body and the mind, what else is there here? if there's nothing more than the body and the mind here, then where is the me who possesses this body and mind? Where is the me who's being praised? If you can't find that me, simply rest in the experience of not finding, knowing there's no me to be found. And we can bring the meditation to a close. And then the text goes on to say, it is said that when you initially ascertain this, meaning emptiness, if you have not previously familiarized yourself with the view, then fear will arise. And that if you have previously familiarized yourself, then mental joy will arise. And so this is quite common, that often when people start this practice, one of the first experiences they have is this fear, this existential fear. Because they're looking, and they can't seem to find, and then they think, and they wrongly interpret that as there's no me at all. Either I don't exist or I'm going out of existence. So this existential fear in this meditation is usually a good sign. It means we're doing the search correctly, but we're coming to not find the me, but then we're misinterpreting that experience. We're misinterpreting that experience of not finding that there's no me at all. But remember, not finding is realizing there's no findable me. There's no inherently existent me. And so if we're having this fear, you can simply ask the question, who's having the fear? Because if fear is arising, then there must be a me experiencing the fear. So that confirms your existence. But the real solution for this fear is, as the Panchen Lama says, is to familiarize ourselves with the view of emptiness. Because if we familiarize ourselves with the view of emptiness, we'll understand that not finding means that there's no independent me. The me that I've grasped to in my entire life that's caused me so much mental afflictions and suffering simply does not exist. And so we'll have a lot of joy when we realize that, and we can let go of that false grasping then. So that's what the text says. But then two other common experiences, which actually we've already sort of dealt with a little bit in some earlier questions, but let's go over them again. One is that we do this investigation and we're not able to investigate well. We can't search clearly. We don't know where to look. We get confused. I'm not sure, is it there in the mind somewhere? Is it not? And often that's because we haven't good enough attention skills, that our mind is not very sharp and clear. So therefore, if we can't investigate well, then we need to go back and do a little bit more work in shamatha to cultivate a more calm, clear, and focused mind. The more calm, clear, and focused it is, the better we'll be able to investigate. A little bit like the example I gave earlier, where if we are looking for a person in a crowded room, but we have very poor eyesight, then we're not going to be able to find much. So therefore, getting good eyesight is like shamatha practice, to have a calm, clear, focused mind. Then we'll be able to investigate much more thoroughly. And so this is actually what we saw at the beginning of this Vipassana part of the text. The very first thing it said is, without wavering from the state of meditative equipoise, meaning without wavering from a balanced, calm, clear, focused mind, use a subtle awareness to intelligently investigate the nature of a person. So we need some more shamatha to help us in our investigation. And then another point I think that came up also in an earlier question was that often what happens in this practice is we turn it into an intellectual exercise because we like to figure things out intellectually. So when the question is asked, where is the me, or, can you find the me anywhere? Then often what can happen is the intellectual mind goes, I know the answer, and it'll be based on our belief system. For example, if we've studied a little bit of Buddhist philosophy, and often we hear in that the thing that really goes from life to life is a subtle mental continuum. We sort of learn that. And then when this question is asked, where is the me to be found? Then the intellectual mind goes, I know the answer. I'm just a subtle mental continuum. That's the real me. And then we're happy with that. And then we're not doing the practice. We're just accepting a belief system, which may or may not be accurate or true or correct. If we've come from maybe a more Christian background, then the tendency could be that, I know the answer. I'm the soul, because that's what goes to heaven and hell. So that's the real inner essence of me. I'm the soul. Or if we've studied a little bit of more New Age systems traditions, where often in New Age traditions, they often say that everything in the known universe is subtle energy, subtle vibration, and we accept that, then the intellectual mind can come in and go, I know the answer. I'm just subtle energy. I'm just subtle vibration. But then we're not doing the practice. And regardless of our belief system, Vipassana is about coming to see reality, not just sort of accepting whatever belief system we happen to have. And I can guarantee that when we get angry, the me that is getting angry, we're not identifying that me as subtle mental continuum or soul or subtle energy, subtle vibration. That's not the me that's getting angry. And so we need to really put aside our belief system and then just look, be an empirical scientist and just look through our own direct experience. What is actually there? Is there really a me to be found there or not? And to really find out what is reality. So that's some common experiences. And then the text goes on now to talk about post-meditation, what to do after the meditation, because we want to be able to continue this practice of emptiness outside of meditation as well. So the text goes on to say, now setting out the presentation for post-meditation. And again, quoting from Nagarjuna, he says, the person is not an ultimate, since it is a collection of 6 elements. And then the commentary from Panchen Lama says, after arising from that meditative equipoise, if you investigate, it is true that the person that mistakenly appears to us due to our own mind being under the control of the demon of ignorance does in fact not exist. Nevertheless, the being, the person, the mere I definitely does exist. So the person that doesn't exist is the inherently existent person, the one that we're grasping onto now. It's actually funny a little bit to understand that the root of all of our mental afflictions and suffering is a non-existent, something that never has existed, cannot exist, and will never exist. This is the root cause of all of our mental afflictions and suffering. It's only because we believe that it exists, we suffer. So this grasping to this independent me, this through the demon of ignorance, is the root of all of our mental afflictions and suffering. But that is not saying that there's no me at all. There is a me, and the me that exists is the me that's merely labeled on the basis of the body and the mind. In short, that's often called the mere I. The I, the me, the person that's merely labeled on the basis of the body and the mind. And so the text goes on to say, furthermore, the way in which it does exist is that, like imputing human onto a can and snake onto a striped rope, person is a mere name imputed upon the mere collection of the 6 elements or the 5 aggregates. So we saw here that the 6 elements, the first 5 equate to the body, and the 6th element of consciousness is the mind. And also the 5 aggregates is an extensive way of breaking up the body and the mind. The first of the 5 aggregates, the form aggregate, is the body. And then the last 4 aggregates, which are feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness, collectively, those 4 aggregates are the mind. So to simplify what's being said in the text, then the person is a mere name imputed upon the body and the mind. So that is the mere I. The I that definitely does exist is the me, the person, the I, that is merely labeled on the basis of the body and the mind. Meaning there's no person to be found in the body and the mind. Just like the example of the snake onto the striped rope, that if we shine the light on the rope, there's no snake to be found there. If we shine the light of wisdom onto the basis here, the body and the mind, there is no me to be found at all. The person is merely labeled on the basis of the body and the mind. And then just a little bit more, and then we'll have some questions. It says, it is a mere sign, merely imputed by conception. And it is not an ultimate, meaning it doesn't exist inherently. It is merely dawning as a dependent arising that is empty like an illusion. Develop that conviction and then meditate. So what it's saying here is that there are 2 parts to emptiness practice. There is what we saw earlier, is what's called space-like emptiness, which is what we do in meditation. We search. If we don't find, that experience of emptiness is like space. We hold that emptiness experience as long as we can. Allow that experience of emptiness to penetrate deeper and deeper into our mind. And then outside of the meditation, we see things as like an illusion, often called illusory-like emptiness. This is what we do outside of meditation. That is, that we investigate appearances outside of meditation. Even though this me and everything I experience seems to exist independent, through my study and meditation on emptiness, I've come to realize that things don't exist as they appear. To really realize that these appearances are deceiving us, and that everything we experience is empty like an illusion, that things do not exist in the way they appear. But again, empty here doesn't mean empty of existence. It doesn't mean things don't really exist. It means empty in terms of not existing as it appears. Everything, including myself, appears to exist independently, but it's not like that. Therefore, it's like an illusion, because an illusion is something that doesn't exist as it appears. And so we are to question appearances in daily life, to really come to see, to realize that things do exist, but they're not existing as they appear, that they're dependent arisings, they're merely labeled, merely imputed by conception. And to really help with this, there's this analogy of things being like an illusion, and there are many other analogies given in the meditation texts. But one analogy that I find very helpful is dream analogy. Things are like a dream. And the analogy is that now, when we're dreaming, in the dream, there really does appear to be an independent dream me here and an independent objective dream world out there. And then if something pleasant appears in the dream, we have attachment. If something unpleasant appears in the dream, we have aversion, maybe fear, anxiety, and so forth. And then we suffer a lot in the dream because of that. But if in the middle of the dream, suddenly we realize it's a dream, meaning we become lucid in the dream, then there will still appear to be an independent dream me. There'll still appear to be an independent dream world out there. But now, because we're lucid, we will realize these appearances are deceiving us, that things do not exist as they appear, that this dream world is really a product of our mind. Which means that if we encounter something pleasant in the dream, in a lucid dream, it would be hard to get attached to it. And if we encounter something unpleasant in a lucid dream, it would be hard to have any aversion towards that. And we would enjoy the dream a hell of a lot more. So what this view of emptiness is saying is that the waking world is like a dream, that now we are asleep with ignorance, meaning that there appears to be an independent me here, an independent world out there, and we grasp onto that. And so if we see something pleasant, we have attachment, unpleasant, aversion, fear, anxiety, and a lot of suffering follows. But if we wake up in our waking world, if we become lucid in the waking world by realizing emptiness, then there'll still appear to be an independent me here. There'll still appear to be an independent objective world out there. But now, because we're lucid, we've realized emptiness, we will realize that these appearances are deceiving us. There is no independent objective world there, independent subjective me here, which means if something pleasant happens to us, it would become hard to have attachment to it. Unpleasant happens to us, it would be hard to have any aversion towards that. And we would enjoy our waking world a hell of a lot more. So I find the analogy of a dream very helpful in understanding emptiness. So that's a little bit about what to do outside of meditation. There's a little bit more to come on that, but that's enough for now. So now we have plenty of time for question answer. So again, if you have any questions, then put them in the chat and Tomer will read them out. So it looks like we've got a few questions there.
Yes, emptiness is a puzzling business. Okay, so we have a question from, actually there's a question from last class from Tammy.
Sure.
And she asks, I've often heard of an aspect of the mind which is luminous in addition to clear knowing. Can you please explain about that?
Luminous is just another translation for the same term. So sometimes the word is translated as clear, sometimes clarity, sometimes luminosity. It's the same word in Sanskrit and Tibetan. And particularly when that word is translated when we're in the context of Tantra, then often the word luminosity is more often used, but it's actually the same term in Tibetan and Sanskrit.
Okay, thanks. Question from Tom.
So just to add on that, so we saw the definition of the mind. It's often translated as the mind is clear and knowing. And in the text here, it was translated as clarity and awareness. But Alan Wallace often translated as luminosity and cognizance. Next question.
Sure. So a question from Tom. What is the distinction between latencies of ignorance and seeds of ignorance? How are they different?
Yeah, good question. The seed of ignorance is the habit. The habit of grasping, the result of that is it leads to grasping. So it's like dormant, it's like the dormant grasping is the seed, it's the habit. Whereas the latency is like a side effect, it's like a stain. It stains the mind. And the difference is that the seed leads to grasping. That's when the seed becomes manifest, it's grasping. When the latency or stain of ignorance, what that leads to is the mistaken dualistic appearance. So that's the latency leads to that mistaken dualistic appearance, whereas the seed leads to more grasping. And the latency is part of what's called the cognitive obscurations, and the seed is part of what's called the afflictive obscurations.
Thanks. Next question is from Dror. You often say that during meditation we should not answer the question intellectually, but from experience of self-investigation. But our experience can be wrong. For example, we can experience the world to be flat and not round. How can we be sure? How can we be sure that the conclusions from meditation are true and valid?
Exactly. Very good question. That's why we need shamatha. A little bit like if we're a scientist and we want to run an experiment using some equipment, but the equipment is faulty, then of course we can come up with 100 different results and we won't be sure about anything because the equipment's faulty. Likewise, now our mind is quite faulty. It's full of dullness, distraction, confusion, and so forth. And so therefore we need to first develop functioning equipment. We need to cultivate this calm, clear, focused mind of shamatha. So we have functioning equipment so that when we do the investigation, we will do it in a very clear, precise way. And then we can really come to see directly what's there. That's why shamatha is so important for Vipassana. Because otherwise we can come up with all sorts of results because our mind is not sharp, clear, and focused. So very good question. Oh, just a little bit more on that too, is going back to the analogy of the empirical scientist. Let's assume that the scientist has functioning equipment and they run the experiment and they get some result. Are they happy with that result, running the experiment once? No, they'll run it again and again and again and again and again to see if they get repeated same results. So similarly in our meditation, we don't just do it once and whatever we come up with, we go, oh, that's the answer. We run it again and again and again and again and see what comes up if we have a repetition there. But not only that, with the empirical scientists, they're not even happy with that. They will then do peer review. They will then go on and ask other scientists, what did they, if they ran the same experiment, what was their result? And so similarly here, we can then also confer with other meditators who are doing similar practices and ask about their results to make sure even further that maybe that we're doing it the right way, that we have some valid results. But the real measure of whether we are really coming to a valid experience is that the assertion is that if we come to really realize emptiness, then that will reduce and eliminate our mental afflictions and suffering. And also as a side effect, therefore, our loving kindness and compassion for others will increase. And so that's a way of also checking our meditation. Are we noticing over time? Are our mental afflictions reducing? Is our mind becoming more quiet? Is our loving kindness and compassion increasing for others? If not, then maybe we are doing something wrong in our meditation. But if this is the longer term, and it would require for us to really start to reduce mental affliction, suffering, and increase loving kindness and compassion, we would really need to have some deep insights into emptiness. If we just have some little brief taste of emptiness in meditation, that will wear off very quickly and that won't have a very lasting effect. So we probably won't notice very much outside of meditation. But if we have a much more stable, clear mind, and we have these experiences, a more penetrating, deeper experience, those experiences will probably continue on a little bit outside of meditation. And then during those times, we will notice that our mental afflictions will be less than normal, feel a little bit more close, more kind and compassionate to others and so forth. So that's also a sign that our practice is going in the right direction.
Okay, thanks. A question from Liora. It seems to be there seems to be a contradiction between the experience of not finding the body when searching for it and the experience of the body in shamatha meditation, when it feels light, at ease, and blissed. How can this be solved?
Remember, in shamatha, we're not investigating anything. We're just observing. And the body exists. And so in shamatha, we're observing the body. In shamatha, are we probably grasping to a body that exists from its own side? Probably. Not necessarily, but most likely when we're observing the body, we're observing it and in the way of seeing the body as existing there objectively. There's this body there objectively that I'm observing. But in shamatha, whether or not we're grasping onto that body is irrelevant because we're just observing the body. Whereas in vipassana, we are then investigating that body. Does the body really exist there objectively or not? And so that's what we're doing in vipassana. And so again, in shamatha, we're not concerned about how the body exists or whether or not we're grasping. We're just observing the body because there is a body there. And even when we come to realize emptiness, that won't negate the body. There is a body there that we can observe even through emptiness, that there is a body there, the dependent body, the body that's merely labeled on its parts. A body exists. So even if we realize emptiness and don't grasp the body, if we go back into shamatha practice, we're still observing the body, minus the grasping, but we're still observing the body. We're still observing sensations in the body.
Okay, thanks. Next question is from Iftach. Why isn't me just the combination of body and mind?
Remember, the me that we're looking for is the me that exists objectively. So the body is not a person. It's a non-person. The mind is not a person. If we put two things together, neither of which is a person, then we just have a collection of two things, neither of which is a person. However, on the basis of the body and the mind, neither of which is a person, we label person. So that's the difference. The person is not the body and the mind. The person is labeled on the basis of the body and the mind. So what's called the basis of designation, the basis that we designate something on is not the designated object. The basis of designation, for example, here, this cup, the basis of designation is just a collection of all of this stuff here. And on that basis, we label cup. So the cup is not, this is not a cup. The cup is not the collection of all of this stuff. The cup is something we're labeling on the basis of the collection of all of this stuff. And the collection of all of this stuff from its own side is not a cup, because the only cup that exists is the cup that we've created in our conceptual mind, the one that we have created on the basis of that, the basis there. Similarly, the person is something merely labeled on the basis of the body and the mind. So there's a big difference between saying that and the person is the body and the mind. So either the person is the body and the mind, or the person is merely labeled on the basis of the body and the mind. Because if the person is the body and the mind, then we wouldn't need to apply the label because there's a person there already. So, but we need to really think about that because, again, we are stuck in these two extremes. But if we can really reflect on the idea of labeling, conception, imputation, we'll slowly come to understand that the thing we are labeling onto the basis is not the basis, because we're applying the label person to that basis. So the person is not the basis. But yeah, so that's enough for now. We can talk about that a lot, but I think that's enough for that question for now.
Okay, thanks. Another question from Dror. Isn't there inherent properties to the mind? A mind that is kind or angry, wouldn't we say that this person has those inherent properties?
Inherent. Here the word inherent, meaning existing from its own side. The word inherent, the way we're using it here, doesn't mean, you know, does a mind always have these properties? Does the mind always have mental afflictions? That the word inherent there we're not using the word inherent in that way here. Inherent, if something's inherent, it means it exists from its own side. We're not debating whether or not that quality is always there in the mind. That may or may not be the case, but here inherent is used in terms of how things exist. Whereas if we want to use the word inherent in other contexts, we could say that the mind always has mental afflictions in there. And then we could use the word inherent to say inherent in the mind is anger, but then we're using it in a different way. We're using the word inherent there to mean that it's always present in the mind, not that it's something existing objectively. So that we have to be, again, careful with terminology and how we use those words.
Okay, thanks. Another question from Tzlir Naviv. What other analogies are there, like the dream one, like the dream analogy for emptiness?
I think this comes up a little bit later in the text. There's like an illusion, like a mirage, like a reflection in a mirror, like an echo, and a number of others, like a magical illusion, a magical display. So these are all simple things in daily life that it's easy to recognize that things don't exist as it appears. So remember, an analogy is not an example. An analogy is a simple thing that we use to understand a more profound thing. So it's easy to understand, for example, that a reflection in a mirror, that our reflection in a mirror, there's no person in the mirror, that the echo, there's no sound coming from over there, that the mirage, that there's no water found over there, and so forth. So these are all analogies that can be very helpful, and a number of these will come up, I think, a bit later in the text.
Okay, thanks. Now the next question is from Dana. Can you please give an example of how things are deceiving us in real life? For example, if we have a conflict with a person, we understand that the conflict is there, but it's because him and I are seeing the situation in a different way. Is that what you mean?
To see it correctly, you mean? I didn't understand the question. Like, what is it that causes the conflict?
Yes. I think that the question is, does deceiving us mean that we have different perspective? That I think my perspective is true.
No, I mean, we can have different perspectives, and probably we will have different perspectives. But just because we have different perspectives doesn't necessarily mean that will lead to argument and fighting and anger and so mental afflictions. So and we will have probably different perspectives, but if we don't, it's only that self-grasping, that the belief there's an independent me here, an independent person there. That's what really leads to mental afflictions and things getting out of control. If we don't have that self-grasping, then yes, we probably might have different perspectives of things, and we may sort of discuss those different perspectives, but that wouldn't lead to any anger or hatred or so forth. We may not agree with the other person's perspective, but it wouldn't cause any, like I said, mental afflictions or anything like that. We would always still be kind and compassionate to the other person, but we still may not accept their perspective, but it wouldn't lead to getting angry and fighting and hating and so forth and reacting. So that's sort of the difference. We're not saying that we'll all end up with the same perspective, because here perspective means conventional perspective. If we all have the same perspective of reality in terms of how things exist, that would be wonderful. Would mean there's no mental afflictions and suffering. We're all kind and compassionate to everyone, but we can still have different conventional perspectives. Someone could have the perspective that this particular flower is beautiful. Another person could have a perspective this flower is ugly, and so forth. But that wouldn't lead to any sort of fighting or hostilities or so forth.
Okay, thanks. This one is from Orna, and it reads, in meditation, when I search where is the I, the ego came up. When I try to investigate where is the ego, that became complicated. What do you think?
Okay, very good question. Generally, in these sort of discussions, I tend to leave out the word ego and also the word, for example, soul, because those words, if I were to use them, then maybe even in this class, if I were to use the word ego, then there may be 20 different ideas about what that word means. Or if I use the word soul, there may be 20 different ideas about what people think the word means. So therefore, I try to avoid those words. I rather just try to clearly define what do we mean by self-grasping. And if I were to use the word ego, I tend to use it as synonymous with the self-grasping mind. And in that sense, then the ego would be this false sense of me that we need to basically transcend the ego. But that's only if we define the ego as this false sense grasping. And I think there are many other people who define it very differently. So that's why I tend to steer clear of using the word ego and soul and so forth, because there are many different ideas about what those words mean, and bringing them in, then we just create mass confusion.
Okay, thanks. Next one is from Tirza. So what is the difference between dream and reality? It seems like it's not the same. It seems like in reality there is something else.
Sorry, I didn't catch what's the difference between a dream and reality?
And reality. Yes.
You mean like a normal dream?
It seems like it's not the same. In reality, there is something else than a dreaming state.
I think the questions may be referring to using the dream as the analogy for reality. So what we're saying here is that we're using the analogy of a dream. Everything is like a dream. We're not saying everything is a dream. We're not saying the waking world is a dream, because it's not. I mean, in a dream, there's no physical reality. We're just saying that in our waking world, everything is like a dream. How is it like a dream? Is that in a dream, there seems to be an independent dream world, but if we become lucid, we'll realize there's no independent dream world. The world is a product of our mind in the dream. Likewise, here, the waking world, it's like a dream in that there also here appears to be an independent objective world. But if we realize emptiness, we become lucid, we'll realize that things do not exist as they appear, that the world of our experience is also a product of our mind. So remember, analogies are not examples. We're not saying this world is a dream. We're saying it's like a dream. And how is it like a dream? Is that they're both deceiving us. But in both cases, we can come to see things clearly by becoming lucid in the dream or by realizing emptiness in the waking world. Okay, I think we've run over time, but maybe one more quick question and then we'll have a break.
Yes, actually, Dana has a follow-up to her question about the different perspectives. She said that the question was actually different, and it is, if you can give an example of what do you mean by being deceived by reality?
Being deceived by reality is that now things appear to exist independent of us, and we just accept that. We're being deceived. There is nothing existing independent of us. Just like in a dream, we're being deceived. There seems to be a dream world existing there objectively, external to us, and that's deceiving us. And in the waking world, the world that we see and believe is deceiving us. There is no independent world there that seems to be there. So that's deceiving us. That's why things are deceptive. So let's break there because we've run over time a little bit. I'm sure there's more questions, but we'll try and cover those questions in the next session. But let's take a break now. And in the next session, we're going to do a little bit more on this emptiness of person, but then we're going to move on to, in the text, it talks about the emptiness of the mind. So that's also coming up in the next session. But let's take a break now. Come back at 12 o'clock for the last session today.